Yeah. So I'm going to talk about two main things. The first issue is about data privacy, security, and benefits. So this is something I feel very strongly about because of my time, both as an academic doing research and also in my interest in privacy. So what are the issues? Well, of all the personal data that exists, health data is arguably the most sensitive form of personal data. But on the other hand, the analysis of health data has arguably the most potential benefit to individuals, as it may enable more effective healthcare. So both the risk and the benefit are clearly large. The issue is that detailed data sets, and in particular longitudinal data, have the greatest risk of re-identification. So in other words, anonymization is not sufficient for protecting most health records. So that's often misunderstood by people who don't understand personal data very well. They assume, oh, as long as I've anonymized the data, why can't the HA provide all of the CMS data for everyone to analyze? Think of all the benefits. The problem is it would be trivial to re-identify most people in that data set. So clearly there are massive risks in doing that. So anonymization is not sufficient. That's the key lesson I want you to take from that slide. Now, AI generally uses black box approaches. Why is that an issue? Well, it means it's actually impossible currently to control and measure that re-identification risk because we don't know exactly what's going on. So unlike with relatively simple statistical methods, in that situation, we already have tools to assess that risk, such as differential privacy. The other issue, of course, with healthcare data is that we generally need a personal identifier in order to continue to update the records. You have to have some way to match it to an individual if they're continuing to give you more data. So that means you have to have somewhere in there a personal identifier. And if you're dealing with a Hong Kong individual, how do you know who they are? Well, generally using the ID card number, right? So even if the ID card number is not the direct identifier, there must be somewhere inside the system some way to link it. Now, you may be using encryption and other ways to reduce the risk. But as some of you, I hope, have read, the government has just been proposing what they're going to do about primary healthcare, which is a great idea, but that means interfacing with private healthcare systems, not just the HA system. So again, that raises the risk, the security risk, much greater, because if you're dealing with external systems, the security cannot be so easily controlled. Right? So in particular, it is not safe to allow access to bulk records outside a secure environment. So the lab that Joyce told you about is a great initiative because that gives you a way to access the bulk records in a safe and secure environment. The idea that they suddenly can give these to some other party for analysis is not, in my view, currently at least, a wise idea. That's not to say technology can never find a solution. That's a very dangerous thing to say, but at the current state of play, it would be unwise. There are also other issues. So when I was working with the Privacy Commissioner's Office, we did the first PCPD audit, and that audit was done at the Hospital Authority. Now, the Hospital Authority has made many improvements since then, but at that time, one of the key issues we found was the challenge about access rights. If you give somebody an access right, say you have the right to access this part of the data set, the problem is that over time, access rights tend to grow. Someone always has a new project, oh, you need to give me access to that part of the data set in addition to ones I already have. It's very difficult to take away access rights. But the management problem is also a major challenge. Okay, but again, I'm not trying to underplay the potential benefits. Please don't take that answer. What about regulation? So Albert talked a little bit about some of the other issues, but I want to focus on three things: 2 laws and 1 framework. So the two laws Albert already mentioned, the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance, and the other one is the e-health ordinance, which is supposed to address the specific issues about the sharing of health data. Lastly, something which I think is relevant, that the government has been criticized, and the universities, with some basis, for not being prepared for ChatGPT and the rest. There is, however, at least a framework for discussion, the ethical artificial intelligence framework. So I'll say a little bit about that. Okay, so the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance is a very strange law. Why is it strange? Because it doesn't, like most laws, say you must do this or you must not do that. It's a long list of principles which it says you must apply with some exemptions. Okay? So Albert already mentioned it. Now, one of the things people often don't understand is that the data protection law is not just about privacy. The original reason for the creation of data protection laws was about fair decision making. So even if you think, oh, most people are more than happy to give up their privacy in return for money, which is frankly often true. However, if you frame it to people, are you willing to give up the right to ensure that there's fair decision making? Not too many people will be happy to do that. That's really the core of what the ordinance is about. There is an exemption for public health, which needs to be there. And I think COVID showed the need for that exemption, but it's not an exemption for health in general. Now, one of the issues, I think Joyce mentioned sensitive data. So there isn't a clear definition of what sensitive data is. There was a proposal at one stage to add in a definition of sensitive data, but that to me is problematic because sensitive data in the context of privacy and data protection has two very different dimensions to it. One is it's sensitive because it's immutable, meaning it's unchangeable. So your ID card number, in theory, can be changed. Right? Good luck with that. And frankly, I don't think it will help you very much, but it can be changed. Your DNA, under normal circumstances, cannot be changed. So if your DNA has been leaked out to the whole world, your DNA is known by everybody. In fact, DNA is even more challenging, of course, because of the issue of familial risk. That's not only a risk to you, but all your family members. Right? So that's one element of risk. And of course, that applies to all the other mutable things, like your fingerprints, your iris, image, and so on. Right? So those are really important. We need to think very carefully about how and under what circumstances we share that information. The other issue is the direct privacy risk. So if you know my HIV status, that could be a massive problem for me. If it means, for example, that I cannot get a certain types of job, nobody will want to employ me, or other issues. Right, so those are quite different. The other issue you need to recognize, of course, it doesn't protect data after death. So it means that all my health data has no protection from the ordinance after I've passed away, or from my father passes away, there is no data protection at all in the law. The other thing is that this focuses, like the European Union, primarily on generic data protections, has almost nothing to do with healthcare. Right, so there's minimal mention of health in the law. The US focus is the other way around. The US, most of the protections come from the specific federal healthcare law. Right, so that's quite a different situation. So we need to distinguish those. So it's a very different context. E-health ordinance. I'm not going to say much about this. This provides the framework for the sharing of your health data in Hong Kong. I have one main criticism, which is the government promised that in stage 2 of setting up this system, they would allow individuals to have some say in which of their data gets shared. That promise has disappeared into ether. The government has completed stage 2, as I understand it, and not fulfilled this. Now, as a privacy advocate, I have a problem with this. That means I either agree to share all my data or nothing. Now, to be fair, the system does constrain the sharing. The provider is supposed to show that they need that particular data, but that's a decision made by the e-health administrators, not by you as an individual. You have no say. Okay? But you need to understand that this is underpinned by arguably the single best healthcare data set in the world. Right? So the CMS that Joyce referred to, part of the CMS underpins e-health, plus some private data as well. So this is the single best data set because its coverage and linkage to the public hospitals, which nearly everybody has a record in, and the Department of Health clinics, which still quite a lot of people go to visit. Right? Now, sharing data has clear benefits for elderly patients in particular. If you have an elderly relative who's living in a private elderly home, clearly you don't want to have a situation where the doctor in that home cannot see the health records when they last visited their doctor in the hospital. Right? That really makes sense. So it's clearly a very good idea. I would say, however, that the publicity for e-health only talks about benefits. You will not find any mention of risk whatsoever in any of the documents. And the potential expansion to primary care increases both the risks and the benefits. And again, you won't find much discussion of the risks, only of the benefits. So I don't deny the benefits, but we need to be aware of the risks. Lastly, the AI framework. So this is essentially built on the model of the data protection law, intended to expand to cover AI. So it's drafted by OGO, this is the government IT people. It has direct input from the previous Privacy Commissioner's office. It was created before ChatGPT. It admits that fair and open decision making is the key challenge, especially for systems that are not open. But it currently has no legal backing. And obviously, it may well need review to make sure that it is appropriate in a situation where unsupervised models clearly introduce new levels of risk that perhaps we hadn't fully considered. Okay, thank you very much.